Hello everyone. My name is Javier Amador Castañeda. I am a respiratory care practitioner at Columbia University Irving Medical Center, and I am also a member of the Sputum Bowl Committee. We'll start promptly. We'll just give it one more minute, and we'll start the meeting.
Good afternoon. It is 1 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to have you here for this online Q&A session about National Sputum Bowl. My name is Julie Bogenwright. I'm the chair of the committee this year. Also joining us are Kathy. She is from Michigan, Melissa from Pennsylvania, Derek from Colorado, Joe from Texas, and Susan is our lovely liaison from the AARC. During this time, we're going to go over a couple of pre-planned topics that we posted about, but then at the end, we're just going to keep it casual, and we would like to open it up to any questions you have about Sputum Bowl in general, about the competition that's coming up in Phoenix in a few months, or anything else you want to talk about. We're pretty much game. So if you're on this call, I'm pretty sure you know what Sputum Bowl is. So we won't go into a lot of detail about that. National competition is in Phoenix, December 6th through the 9th. Javier, who has put together this whole project today, has made the rules accessible from this website. Also, you can access those on the Sputum Bowl website as well if you have any questions. I just want to point out that towards the end of the rule book, there is a page on references, and that lists all of the references we use. That's where all the questions come from. But it is a good idea to look over those references to see which edition that we're using, just to kind of make sure that's what you're looking at when you're studying for your questions. For those who have registered, the team captain should have received a copy of their registration form. If you did not, you can contact Susan or myself, and we'll be happy to resend that to you. I just want to talk a little bit about the process so you understand how it works. Susan reviews all the registration forms, and then she sends an invoice to whoever the team designated as the person that gets to receive the invoice. Once payment is received, she sends you a link to complete your team roster. This is due by October the 3rd. And then if you have any roster revisions, if you need to change anybody out, that needs to be done by November the 1st. As we get closer to Congress, either Susan or I will reach out to the team captains to give you a code for you and your team to use to register for Congress. And then for the big day, the night before Congress starts, Friday, December 5th, we will have a meeting for all team captains, but we welcome for Any team members to come as well. We'll go over a PowerPoint with the rules, some helpful hints. And it also gives you a chance to test out the equipment. So you can like practice speaking into the microphone, you can practice using the buzzer system, just kind of get you familiar with where the room is. It's always a good idea to know where you need to go. But you need to contact me, team captains, if you or a representative is unable to make this meeting, because we're going to go over all the prep work at that meeting and we're going to get started first thing Saturday morning with games. We are excited to announce that we have 26 teams competing in the competition this year. So that is up from 17 last year. So we are very excited to see all of you there. But more teams means more games and 2 long days of prelims. So we're probably going to be getting started pretty early on Saturday morning. Before the competition begins, team captains will receive a QR code from me with a bracket, a play, along with a game schedule with the times. So that way you will know what time your team has their first game on Saturday. The preliminaries will be scheduled over the first 2 days, so that's Saturday and Sunday, December 6th and 7th. And then the finals will be Monday night, December the 8th from 6 to 9. The committee is still working on finalizing a theme for the competition this year, but we will send that out to you as soon as we have it before you travel, because we want to encourage you to dress up and participate because it just makes the event a lot more fun. All right, I think that's all I have about the competition at this time. Why don't we have one of Javier's questions? So he's going to launch a poll for the group that we want you all to answer.
Alrighty, everyone. So let's start with, I believe it's gonna do all 3 questions at one time. So I'm gonna activate the poll. And if you can kindly answer the following questions. What state are you from? Does your Sputum Bowl have a state competition? And would you be interested in participating in a practitioner Sputum Bowl? And we'll give it a couple of minutes for everyone to answer. We are live on LinkedIn. We have a couple of people logged in, so I'll ask them the same questions there.
It looks in the chat like somebody's been removed. Sarah Parker.
Is anyone else getting removed from the meeting? I'm not sure why someone would get removed from the meeting. If it's happening, please message me privately so we can figure it out. I know there's about 20 participants in total at the moment. Okay. Let's give it about 30 more seconds. All right, and we're gonna end the poll now. All right, so here are the results. I'm not sure if you guys can see this. The first question, we're probably going to keep it internally as far as the state, because we have to log in into a different section. But does your Sputum Bowl have a state competition? About 10 out of the 11 participants said yes, and one of them said no. So most of you guys have a state competition, which is good. And then would you be interested participating in a practitioner sputum bowl. Only 2 answer no, about 82% answer yes. And I think the very few people that did answer the poll on LinkedIn, they said that yes, they will be interested in a practitioner sputum bowl. So this is good. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing.
All right, thank you, Javier. That's great information. The next thing we're going to look at is we've had requests on learning how to write a high quality question. The one member of our committee who's not here today is Liz, but Liz and Joe are our moderators for the National Sputum Bowl. So Joe's going to talk a little bit about how you can learn how to write a good Sputum Bowl question.
All righty, fantastic. Thank you, Julie, and welcome all attendees that are here as well joining us on LinkedIn. I appreciate y'all being here. I'm going to share my screen if I may. I don't have a fancy presentation, but I do have notes here that'll probably be easier for you to see rather than just listen to. So the first thing you see here on your screen, Julie, give me some positive feedback. You can see this?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. The first thing you're seeing here are the categories, and the categories are important because that's where we know we're targeting specific questions, and you have to, as you start to build a bank, you want to be able to reevaluate your questions so that you know that you have a fair breakdown of each category. If you just write a bunch of mechanical ventilation questions and then you get to the competition and realize that there's a lot more other than just mechanical ventilation, then you might be disappointed. And so this can be found also in the Sputum Bowl rulebook, as well as with the percentage breakdown. So I want to say the highest category is like 9%. They're the categories at the top. And then as you move down, you'll see where you get less and less. I want to say all the way down to maybe 2 or 3%. But those are the different categories ranging everywhere from anatomy and physiology, diagnostics, mechanical ventilation. And I don't need to read all that to you because you can read, but including things like history, management, home care, long-term care. So you want a wide variety of questions in your bank as you work to build your bank. Okay. Now, when it comes to writing actual questions, here's my top 5 tips for you in writing questions. Number 1, keep them closed-ended questions because short answer questions keep the game moving at a good pace. The last thing you want to do is get into a Sputum Bowl game and have really long, drawn-out, open-ended questions. It's going to first of all, you're going to have a lot of judge interaction because it's going to be like, is that exactly what we're looking for here or not? And so you want it to be very clear, closed-ended questions to just keep it fast-paced. It's not fun when you get to the end of a game and you've only read, 10 questions. And so the more to the point they are, then the more it keeps the game moving. Also, if there are multiple answers to a question, you want to specify those in the answer key. So, for example, if you were to say list an indication for oxygen therapy, then in the answer key for the moderator, you would want all the indications for oxygen therapy listed because the question only asked for one indication. And so when you have multiple answers, make sure and list them out, and not just multiple answers, but also multiple way things can be stated. And so we know that, you say, uncompensated respiratory acidosis for a blood gas interpretation, as opposed to acute hyperventilation or acute ventilatory failure. So if that's an acceptable answer, and they're the same, both of those are acceptable answers, then you want to give those options to the moderator to keep the game moving as well, and to reduce the number of what word am I looking for, Julie? Protest or contested questions. You want to reduce the number of those. You can do that by being clear in your questions and your answers. And that's what I say there. The next example, number 3, is that for various forms such as atopic asthma, allergic asthma, extrinsic asthma, list all those so we know clearly right off the bat that they're the right answers. Also, when applicable, if you're asking about a range, then you want to provide the acceptable ranges. So if you're talking about, especially when you get to history and it's like, in what, if you're asking about a decade, then it's clear that, okay, we're saying if you say 1985, if it's in the 80s and that's an acceptable answer, then we know that's an acceptable range. But even the same thing with, identify a normal hemoglobin. If they give you a single number, then knowing it's acceptable within the range according to the reference that you're using. And so, as we know, references vary slightly. So, this is something that you want to be clear on, or adopt the range to accommodate various resources. But if your question starts off with, according to Egan's, what is a normal hemoglobin, then that range needs to come from Egan's specifically. And then the last one there is keep calculations very, very simple. If you're going to ask, which I wouldn't ask about the alveolar equation, actually having to do it, or the Henderson-Hasselbalch. I mean, we don't allow calculators or smartphones or any type of electronic devices. So the students or the contestants are going to be utilizing paper and pencil to calculate whatever you ask them to calculate. So complicated calculations to actually get a number are not recommended. If you're going to ask a calculation question, then something that's relatively easy to calculate, like if a patient has a respiratory rate of 10 and a tidal volume of 500, what is their minute volume? That's a relatively simple calculation that can be done on paper and pencil, if not in the head alone. So things like that. So I mean, when we talk about keeping calculations simple, if you're going to ask, if you have a patient who's on a nasal cannula operating at 3 liters per minute, what is the approximate FiO2? That is a fairly simple calculation that knowing and understanding the rule of fours can be done easily. So keep your calculations to as simple as you can, so that you're not, because they only have 10 seconds, I think, to answer the question. And so the alveolar equation takes 10 seconds to write it down. And so, that's not going to be a fair question to ask. Those are my top 5. Now, what I'd like to do is really show you how I create questions. And it's funny because I talked to Liz, who said to apologize for her not being able to be here. But it's funny because we were talking about how we write questions, and we actually have the exact same method. And so the first thing I do is pull out whatever reference I am using. And so if we're going to use Egan's for this example, Egan's 13th, that's the edition we're using. And really, I just turn to a page for whatever topic it is that I'm looking for, and I just start reading. And so for this, I'm just going to turn to page 676. And the very first sentence on this page says, continuous positive airway pressure therapy was introduced to manage OSA in 1981. That's the very first sentence. Now, all I have to do now is just turn that into a question. So I could ask, in what year was CPAP, or continuous positive airway pressure, introduced for the management of OSA? I could write that. I could use that same sentence for another question and say, in 1981, what therapy was introduced for the management of OSA? And so you see, where you have one sentence, you can turn it into 2 or 3 different questions just based off of that. And you can do that pretty much anywhere. If I just flip here to another page here, I see a sentence here. It says a variation of a PMDI is a breath actuated inhaler, which incorporates a trigger activated during inhalation. You can easily turn that into a question that's closed-ended and easily answered, with the answer being breath actuated inhaler. Which variation of PMDI incorporates a trigger activated during inhalation? And then we know that the answer is breath actuated inhaler. Now, so it really is just about reading the chapters. If Julie sends me an email and says, write me 15 questions pathophysiology related, then I'm going to the pathophysiology sections in Egan's or whatever patho book that's on the reference list, and I'm just going to start reading and turning things back into questions. The other thing, if you ever get stuck, and it gets hard sometimes, you're like, okay, all the questions can't be the same. And so, like, I need something. I need 2 more questions to hit my quota this month for my Sputum Bowl questions. What I'll do is just flip to the glossary. And just look at those key terms there in the glossary. And if I just open it up here and I'm on the G page and I see grunting and defined as an expiratory sound caused by the sudden closure of the glottis during exhalation to maintain functional residual capacity and prevent alveolar atelectasis. Easily turn that into a question where the answer is grunting. What is defined by an expiratory sound, so forth, so forth, so forth. And then one other little thing here is, as I was reading this, I was thinking to myself, there's actually another question in here, because you could say grunting is defined as an expiratory sound caused by the sudden closure of the glottis during exhalation to maintain FRC. And then the follow-up question is what does FRC stand for? So you see here in just getting into the text and thinking about it from a short answer, quick questions, how can I write these questions? A lot of times, one word, you can get one sentence, you can get 2 or 3 questions from. And of course, you're going to want to spread those out. But we're just talking about building a bank right now. So as you build your bank, you start to randomize them so that you're not asking, you wouldn't ask the 1981 question about CPAP all right back to back to back. But those questions can be reused and recycled and show up in later games. And that's what it is. Me and Liz were talking about, at the end of the day, there's only so much material to write so many questions over. So you kind of have to get creative in writing and rewriting the same question in multiple different ways. I want to show you one more thing here, because we do also use visuals. The key with visuals is this: you have to have the image to answer the question. So for example, if we put this image up, and this one is probably a little overcomplicated because there's letters, there's numbers and letters, and there's a lot of different going on in here. But if you simplified this image and you just had the 4 chambers of the heart numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, you wouldn't want to ask the question that says, which chamber of the heart is responsible for pulmonary perfusion? Because I don't need that image to know that the answer is the right ventricle. I need that image when you ask the question like this: which number represents the chamber of the heart responsible for pulmonary perfusion? And now I have to know that the answer is the right ventricle, and I have to know where it is when looking at an image. And so anytime you're writing visuals, just keep that in mind. Can this question be answered without this image? And if the answer is yes, then it's not a good visual. You have to have it. And then, and once again, I was talking about reusing multiple questions. I mean, you could write, but half of y'all probably use these in your classrooms and write 10 or 11 things to label on this. And so this image by itself could be recycled with variations of different pieces of anatomy of the heart. And so, so that's what I have for you in terms of writing questions. Remember, keep them simple, closed-ended, short answers that keep the game going. That's the number one piece of feedback we got coming out after our summer forum meeting was we stopped doing Sputum Bowl, but the questions weren't like that. If you remember, if you were there, Liz, we moderated a game. Liz moderated a game for us. The fast pace is what makes it fun. It's what makes it engaging and exciting to watch, and the crowd gets into it when it's not a slow process. So keep the questions simple and clear, and you'll reduce a lot of your headaches. And then the other thing is this: it takes a while to build a large bank of questions. Nobody wants to sit down and write 500 questions. I promise you, nobody does. And so the way you can build your bank is involve your students and involve other schools. And so if you are in a state with 5 other schools and y'all are all going to compete in Sputum Bowl and you all have Sputum Bowl teams, if each of you were to make a 100-question bank that you spread out over, if 10 students wrote 10 questions, you now have a 100-question bank. And if every program has a 100-question bank and everybody shares with everybody, now everybody has a 500-question bank. Also important to mention here, those questions shouldn't be the questions that are asked at the state competition. And so sharing your questions shouldn't impair the level of competition. If anything, it should enhance it because everybody's got more resources to practice with. And so utilize your fellow educators, your fellow institutions to work together to build a big bank quicker rather than trying to do it on your own. I mean, I think I was talking to Julie the other day, and we were talking about the Texas bank, and we haven't done this, but I think the conversation was what would be the harm of sharing a state bank with another state bank? Well, they're not going to be the same questions when we do that. So you see what I'm saying? So it's really all about just having as most resources you can when it comes to questions and variations of them, and working with the people around you to share and to build it as quickly as you can. And I'm pretty sure I'm over time, so I'll shut this down and take any questions anybody has.
Thank you, Joe. And for the questions that are read at the National Sputum Bowl, they are all produced by us, by the committee. So they are not taken from any specific state bank. I want you to know that
Right.
they are all original. One other thing about questions, sometimes you think you know where the question is going, and then it takes like a hook the other direction. So you might get hoodwinked by that, buzz in early, and that's not what they were asking. So just be wary of those along the way.
Yeah.
All right. Next portion of our talk today, we had some questions at Summer Forum to talk about how to run a successful state competition. I'm the coordinator in Texas. Melissa is in Pennsylvania. Kathy and Liz do Michigan. And Derek does Colorado. So we all have a lot of input. But Kathy, excuse me, I'm sorry. Kathy is going to talk about how they do things in Michigan and give you some helpful hints. Oops, Kathy, you're muted.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, well, we like to consider Michigan having one of the best damn sputum bowls out there, but Texas has a problem with that. So, and they showed us that one time too, by gosh. So there's a couple different things to think about. I made some notes, and David Pansel, who's our chair at Michigan right now for our Sputum Bowl, also shared some of his information with me. But really, I think the first thing is you really have to have a strong committee that's in sync with each other. So as I look at these pictures right now, this is a committee at the national level, and we're pretty in sync, I would say. We just clicked. And so you need a committee that's like that. You need a chair. You need a moderator, and we usually have 2 to 3 people that can moderate. In Michigan, Liz is one of them. Nick Prush is one of them. Some of you might have heard with them. David Panso, Rick Sahodnik. Oh, these are people I mentioned that have also played at the national level, and probably at least 4 of them, including myself, have played at the national level or have been involved in the national committee. But you need the scorekeeper, timekeeper, and a support person. I'm calling that person a trainee. So if you're trying to bring in new people, you might want to find somebody that, number one, I would say they should have either played the game at their state level, hopefully the national level. We made Liz do that before she came on the Michigan committee. And that way, they've had experience, they understand the game, or at least they're coaching teams out there at their school. So I think that's really, really important to have a little bit of experience on the people that are coming in to do that. Now, if you do have somebody that's on the committee and they have a college group of students, obviously you're not going to be the moderator for your own students. That's why I suggest you have more than one moderator. You see people shift back and forth, so they're not having people think that they're at an advantage. A moderator should have skills in speaking, making decisions, and pronunciation of medical terms. I lived a nightmare one time. I am not a moderator. I might have caused a game. You don't want that. You want people that really can do the language. Judges, that's not a part of the committee, but we typically will go out and recruit judges at the national. I think in Michigan, we usually will contact some people, or as they're coming in, they're usually typically educators, program directors, clinical directors. And of course, we don't have them judge if their own team is up there doing anything. So a strong committee. I also think you need a strong policy and procedure book to map out how the whole thing runs. And that way, if you've got a new chair coming in, they've got a roadmap. They know what they need to do. And I know Michigan's in the process of getting that all refined and updated. So if our chair stepped down, another chair would have that book, and it's helpful to the whole committee. So that would spell out your roles, what you do on the committee, how to format a committee, things like that. The next thing I would speak to would be the cost in the AV. There is a cost. So at each state competition, you're going to have to look at where is the room that you're putting it on at your state competition. What's the AV cost? How much do they charge per day for that? And then there's always those fun final nights where you have costumes and fun things like that. And in fact, does anybody know who wore this hat when we did Harry Potter at last year's National? And he's a renowned respiratory therapy author. Go ahead and throw it in the chat and we'll look back at it. Okay, who wore this hat as a judge who's a renowned author of respiratory therapy books? And this is a sorting hat from Harry Potter. So it's important to look at what your cost is going to be. Now, at Michigan for this year, we had budgeted $4,200 for the winning team to go to the Nationals. And then a second sponsor, so it's great if you can have more than one sponsor at your state, chipped in another $500 for that, for travel, t-shirts. They're getting the team t-shirts. So fun things that you can do like that, but you do have to have a budget. And if you're sending your winning team, you need to know how, typically you're going to send 4 people, right? That would make sense. We're looking at right now to possibly having a second place team that gets half that amount that's budgeted. So the first place team gets the whole ride. Second place team maybe gets half that amount. And we encourage them to work with their colleges to do funding, GoFundMe, get a funding page, do whatever you need to do that. And I would say the thing, if you're putting a renegade team out there from your state, it doesn't have to be your winning team or the second place team. Correct. You know, anybody can put a team together as long as they, you know, are doing the application and so forth. So look at your IV. One of the things that we're doing in Michigan, we wanted to do a practice the night before, kind of like what we're doing at the Nationals, but there's a cost to the room. There's a cost to the AV. So here's a cost saving tip that actually I give credit to Dave Pansel for this one. Contacting wherever your state seminar is being held, contact a college that's close by. See if the respiratory therapy program can come up with a room that they can go in the night before that's close to the venue and practice. You know, you can do a score on a whiteboard. You can do a score with score count like Derek and I do. You can have a basketball score thing. And we're going to be doing a practice session in Frankenmuth in October in Michigan. And I'm just grabbing one of the little basketball score things and taking that with us. So we've got several teams that want to compete, you know, and practice and do that. So save yourself some money, see if you can lock into a college to do that. Questions for the game. I think pretty much, Joe, you've already answered most of those. What we do in Michigan is the people that are coming into the competition have to write their team has to write 25 questions. And then a delegated person from the committee goes through those questions with a fine-tooth comb, usually rewrites a lot of them because we're going to use those at our state competition. And we have talked about also the committee members writing questions to go with that too. And as Joe said, an example that I would have from Michigan, 25 questions, 20 students, you got 500 questions right there ready to put in the bank. So that's really helpful with that. But the other thing we do when we as a committee, we make sure, and that's why it's nice to have that trainee there, extra people there. We make sure that the team that's playing is not getting their own questions. That's happened before. Yeah, I think that happened between a Michigan and a Texas game one time at a national conference. But We make sure we look at that. We make sure they're not getting the same questions. So that's where the whole committee can come into play with that. And then as far as promotion, because I don't want to take too much time, but make it a big deal. Contact the educational chair person, the education section at your state, and say, hey, get this out to all the programs. Let's get everybody excited about this. Let's get teams together. So some ways you could do that is contact your education section, have them help you get that out to the colleges, have your program committee contact the people that they know. You know, we all know each other in our states who has the programs, things like that. Another good idea would have the president reach out of your association. Have the president reach out to the college, talk to them. It kind of like grabs you when the president of your state society is calling you to and say, hey, you know, let's talk about Sputum Bowl. That's not always possible. Some people might not be willing to do that, but you know, there's lots of options for the committee to reach out to different people too. And then I would say maybe like we're doing right now, have a Q&A for your state, just like we're doing here. Get your educators into a QA at your state. Call Javier, he'll set it up for you. And then we cap our teams at 16 because if you get over 16, it gets long. Julie, ours is capped at 30. What's it capped at? You're muted.
35.
35. You know, at the national level, it's 35. And God, we got 26. I'm so excited. But we try to cap at 16. So we try to get that promotion out there early because if we've got 16 teams and somebody's trying to jump on, they might not be able to get on. I guess it's a good problem, right? So we do cap. And, you know, another idea would be, and again, I give Dave Panslow credit for this, and Jan Fields, who was one of our chairpersons a long time ago. They would do the west side of the state, the north side of the state, the east side of the state, and have friendly little competitions and bring these teams in and let them practice with each other. And that was always a lot of fun. But I think, you know, in a nutshell, a good, strong committee in sync. It's about education, it's about sportsmanship, and it's really, really, really about fun at the finals. Dressing up, being Luna from Harry Potter, get your teams to dress up, get them to have fun, have them promote their state, wear the t-shirt from the college that they're at, get somebody to, you know, give them those t-shirts and get them in there to have some fun. So it should be fun. Yes, it's stressful, but it's fun. So if you have any questions, can throw them my way or put them in the chat. And did anybody answer whose hat that was?
They did. A couple of them got it right.
Oh, Dean Hess. Yes, our famous Dean Hess wore that hat. So see, now if that had been a Sputum Bowl question, Joe, how would you have put that question out there?
It would have been a visual.
It would have been a visual. Okay, I like that. Okay,
Definitely.
so that's what I've got, you know, to share with putting a committee together and having a good state Sputum Bowl. You got to promote it and you got to make it exciting.
Thank you, Kathy. I'll just tag on a few other things. I kind of bypass and email the other program directors myself in Texas to get them involved. I send a save the day early. This is when it's going to be. This is what the date is. And it's always during our state convention, but typically the Sputum Bowl is during one day of that. Also, you need to have a designated buzzer system that you're going to use for the national competition.
Yep.
Who owns it? Does it belong to a school? That's not really fair because that school got to practice on it. So it really should belong to the state and kind of be independent of everyone else. You got to make sure you have extension cords. Like Kathy said, AV is always a huge deal. We talked to the person on our program committee to set that up. You're going to need some kind of display where the scoreboard can be seen and the visual questions can be seen. Usually going to need at least two computers, one for the moderator to read their questions, one for what's going to be displayed on the screen. If you can afford it, it's really nice to have two monitors in front of each team, so they're not having to turn around back and forth to look at visuals, and that way everybody can kind of see what's going on. Also making your bracket. There's a lot of bracket generators online. We use one that's called Challenge that works pretty well for us. And you just put in how many teams, double elimination, and it just puts it all together. It does not put the times in. We kind of do that independently ourselves, but it is nice that you can create a QR code from it and update it live so that even if you're not in the room, you can see what's going on. And then you always need to plan to be there at least a day before your competition, because something's inevitably going to go wrong. The buzzer system's not going to work. The room layout is not what you were expecting. You're going to have to pivot and do a lot of things. So just plan to be there a day ahead of time, with your committee to get things going. Joe and I do the main lifting in Texas, and he and I write most of the questions for our bank. But you can always pull in educators that are there with their teams to help you out the day of. That can be judging, that can be resetting buzzers, timekeeping. But there's usually a lot of people that will help you. But it's all about pre-planning, getting people involved. And then we always try to secure people from our TSRC board to serve as judges for the finals night, and make sure nothing else is going on the convention slate during your finals so that you can have a good crowd to come watch the last few games. Melissa, Derek, do y'all have anything to add?
I would say I think the biggest thing is communicating with the teams too. Like Julie said, send out that save the date. I make sure that I send out the rule book. In the state of Pennsylvania, ours is a lot smaller than what Michigan and Texas have. This year, I think we only had 8 teams competing, so it was pretty small. But when I was doing the rules for Pennsylvania, I looked at what what we do nationally, and then I kind of scaled it down a little bit to fit our needs. But I sent that out multiple times, because I wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page and we all knew what was going to happen, what was expected. Like Julie, I was the one who contacted all of the program directors myself. I thought it was just easier to do it that way instead of kind of going through our state board. The other thing is that for Pennsylvania, the state board, we're trying to incorporate in our conferences fundraisers that would specifically go to funding multiple teams from Pennsylvania to attend the conference. So that's always an option too to help students.
Yeah. And then one thing real quick that we were able to do is make sure that we have the teams practice. We have state meetings, but we also have little leadership meetings for the leadership of the state society, and the student leadership will meet, and then they wanted to play Sputum Bowl every time the leadership meets. So we would bring the buzzers, we'd bring questions, and have the schools play each other just for fun at those little leadership meetings for the Colorado Society there as well. So it'd be just a little fun thing that you could play every once in a while. And we would scale down the playbook. We wouldn't do the 2-minute penalty period. We wouldn't do the at-risk category. So it could just be highest score, no penalties, that type of thing. So something simple just to take down that barrier initially and just get the fun out there.
All right, thanks, guys. One thing I would recommend is, if you can, tailor your rule book close to the AARC rules so that your students are practicing on what they're going to be doing at the national level, so there are no surprises. All right, there was one more thing I was going to say, but it has slipped my mind. I can tell it is Friday. All right, it'll come back to me. We are going to move on to our final topic, which is going to kick it back to Joe. We're just going to talk a little bit more about Practitioner Sputum Bowl.
Yeah, so that's the Practitioner Sputum Bowl has longstanding history with the AARC, but has not returned since it was discontinued prior or at COVID, basically with it's no longer there, let's just say that. But there seems to be enough of a rumble about bringing it back that it's at least worth the investigation of should we bring it back or not. And that's where we're hoping to get insight from you. I mean, answering the panel question at 82% was, I think, the first step. A small sample size, but still 82% of that said yes, that you would be in favor of participating or having a practitioner bowl, bringing it back. And that's the biggest thing where we are now is for those of you who run state sputum bowls right now for the students, if you could in the chat, is there any discussion about bringing back a practitioner bowl at your state level? I'm not saying if it's actually happening, but just have you seen, is there any conversations about that happening? Because I think for it to become something that actually does make its way back at the AARC level, and Susan, I'll let you correct me here if I'm wrong, it's going to have to be something that from a feasibility and a financial standpoint makes sense to bring back. And so, you can't bring it back for 2 teams because you have 8 people across the country that want to compete against another team that they still want revenge against. That's not the point of it. And so we're really in the point right now to where we're just analyzing the whole thing and trying to get a feel for what really honestly what the practitioners of this country want in terms of bringing back and having the opportunity to compete as practitioners. The setup is the same. So if you're familiar with Sputum Bowl as it is now, everything you've heard today, the category is the same, the gameplay is the same. It's just practitioners are no longer students, which is probably important to clarify here. The current rule book to compete in the Student Practitioner Bowl basically is this: you have to have graduated in the year of the competition. And so every year, actually last year's team, they had graduated in 24, but I thought we were in 26 already. My mind just almost messed me up. The 2024 winners of the AARC, the Sputum Bowl last year in Orlando, they graduated in May of 24. They're still eligible for the student competition last year. So there was a completely, that was a fair team. All the rules checked out. You can be enrolled or have graduated. The Practitioner Bowl is going to be specific for people that love it so much that they just want to keep coming back and playing. And but they've graduated in a year prior to the year of the competition. So, for example, last year's winning student team could come back this year if we had one this year in 25, and they would be eligible to compete in the Practitioner Bowl, not the Student Bowl, obviously. And then that would apply to anybody who maybe has graduated, maybe maybe with me, class of 2001. And it's like, wait, they're bringing back Practitioner Bowl? I want to play Sputum Bowl. Then you're going to obviously go into the Practitioner Bowl. And that's where we are. So really the point of it being on the agenda was to just get feedback from y'all on how excited, for those of you here, how exciting are you to hear that that's even a potential possibility, so that we know if it's worth pursuing, continue to analyze, continue to figure out how we kick it back up, how we get it going again, and in what year do we get it going again? Do we bring it back in is 26 a possibility, maybe 27? Those are the questions we need answered from the AARC standpoint, and just really knowing if it's going to come back or not. So I don't know. I think we have to use the chat unless Javier has another option. But if you have anything you want to add to that, any input that we can take back as a committee and say, hey, had these people at the Q&A, and this is what they were talking about. Thank you, Illinois, for talking about discussing it and bringing it back there in Illinois. I know California is having one, I think, later this year. And so I know there's a Practitioner Bowl at least happening at the California level. And we just need to know where they're happening and how many, so we know if it makes sense at the national level. Did I forget anything, Julie?
I don't think so. And I'm just going to hop back a minute because I remembered what I was going to say. It sounds like the majority of the people on this call have established state sputum bowls. So we would like to challenge you to invite maybe your friends from the smaller states nearby to participate in yours just to get them involved because sometimes they just don't really know how to get started. But at this time, I think we have covered all of the topics that we wanted to, but we want to open it up to questions. Javier can jump in here and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you type them in the chat, and then we can kind of take turns answering. Oh, here he is.
Julie, while they're, I'm sorry, can I say this real quick, Javier? Real quick, Julie, just to piggyback off of what you just said about inviting your neighboring states, especially if they're smaller. I mean, some states out there only have 2 programs. And so that's not going to be a fun sputum bowl. And so if you're neighboring with states that have a fewer programs, or if you're a small state and you're like, we only have 2 programs, then what states are close to you to where you could get maybe like a tri-state sputum bowl or something, and everybody brings 2 or 3, and now you've got an 8, 9, 10 team sputum bowl. So it definitely all goes back to collaboration. And so yeah, reach out and build it.
Just to piggyback off of both of you, Pennsylvania is working with Delaware because they only have two schools, like Joe said, and they have 8 students in the entire state. So I had somebody from Delaware reach out to me, actually. So this year in the springtime, Pennsylvania and Delaware are working together to do a collaborative sputum bowl between the 2 states. So if anybody has any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me and I can try and help and answer any questions.
Javier, do you have any special instructions?
No, well, just to quickly reiterate, at the bottom of your screen, just don't forget that under resources, you can actually access the link of the Sputum Bowl website. You can also, under documents, you can actually access the rule book that you can download. And under speakers, if you have any specific questions, if you go to speakers, there's also the speakers information. So you may get the email if they have any social media links that they share. You can also contact them through there. As far as the questions, we got one on LinkedIn, but it was not related to this meeting. So I forwarded that information to Susan. Hopefully she can help this person. And most of the questions that were asked on the chat, thank you, Michael Terry, they were pretty much answered by him. Some of them were like, if we had any questions to share, like of the format, but we did include a link for a Quizlet link that they can access and kind of get an idea. We also just had a brief question that I briefly answered on, is there a time for the December 5 meeting, the captain's meeting? So I said it was at 6 p.m. MST time. The location, I'm assuming, will be TBD, Julie, unless you have that information.
I don't have it on me, but I will definitely be either emailing or texting team captains to give them that information.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? You can enter them in the chat or the Q&A chat before we wrap this up. And we'll also include a link to this video, which has been recorded, and we'll spread it on various social media outlets.
Michael, I see your question, and thank you for being so helpful during this meeting answering the other questions. But we will definitely need help with judging. We don't have that together yet, but we will get a Sign Up Genius link and probably post that in the Sputum Bowl Connect area to get that started. So just keep an eye on that if you are interested in judging.
And real quick, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who has submitted photos of their winning teams from their states. The AARC is obviously thrilled to be, having Sputum Bowl back at our event. I think it's the most fun thing that we do at Congress. So thank you for the photos. We stepped up our promotional game, I feel like, this year. So that's a big part of the reason why we've got so many teams, I think. So we just want to keep up the momentum. And we always want to see what's happening at the state level, year round. So feel free to keep sending, photos in. And I'd love to see some photos of just with the competition, what it looks like where y'all are at. Because the more we know about what's going on, the better our national event will be. So just thanks to everybody.
There are no dumb questions. For who can be a team captain, that is your decision. So you kind of decide who your team is. You can pick who the captain is. A team can be up to 4 people. But for our purposes, that's who I'm going to contact to disseminate information to. So we will need the phone number and email of the team captain on the application form when you do register your team. But there are no special qualifications. Just be an RT student.
So to clarify, it's not the faculty sponsor.
No, it
It's
is
one
the
of the
student.
one of the contestants.
I'm not sure how many Renegade teams there are. I mean, we don't really label them as Renegade anymore. We've just opened it up to as many teams who want to register. I believe there are actually 6 from Texas. There are 3 from California. A couple others have 2. Illinois has 2. I think one other, Colorado has 2. So it's a good round number. We're super excited about how many we have. And we just hope to continue to grow and get more states involved because that's really makes it a lot more fun.
Julie, can I hop in there too?
Sure.
It didn't work out so well this year for us at Michigan, but if other students want to form a team and go, usually if they dig around in the college, there's funding to help them do it. You just have, if you don't ask, you don't know. So if somebody wants to form a team that's not being sent from your state society, I'd encourage them to go to student club and see if they have funds. I got funds last year from a really crazy situation that happened to be available at the college. So you got to ask. And then sometimes you can get some financing for some teams to go.
And if you'll look back in the AARC Connect, I did do a post on fundraising options and how to raise money to take your teams places. So look back in there for some ideas if you're searching.
And I think that what Kathy just said about going to your school, I think it's important when you go to your school that you're not just going to some fun game. I mean, this is a national competition, just like a national rodeo or a national basketball tournament or a national football game. It's a national competition for schools to market and to showcase their school's involvement. And if they win, then they've got a national winning team. Sometimes we lose sight of what it really is, but that's what it is. And so, highlight that in your request to your school so that they understand that we're just not going to play a game. You're going as a competitor in a national event against other schools. I think it carries weight.
And they also get to attend Congress for $100, the whole team, 4 people, 3 people. They then have access to the exhibits. They have access to the lectures, the keynotes. It's such a growing experience. I know we had a student that played 2 years ago, Renegade team, incidentally, and they landed a job in a different state because of it. So there's so many opportunities if they can get out there and play. And if the colleges understand that part, like Joe said, makes a huge difference.
All right. Well, our hour is about up. Does anybody have any other questions they would like to ask? And if you don't want to ask it here, feel free to email any of us later. We don't believe in dumb questions. We'll answer anything. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time on a Friday afternoon. We hope you have a wonderful weekend and hope to see all of you in Phoenix in a few months.